Hello and welcome to another edition of Bud Light's Prediction Amongst Friends. I'm your host, Hans Heiser. Thank you so much for being part of our show today in this holiday season. It's bowl season, and last night we had a great one going down in the Texas Bowl, which, you guessed it, Texas won the game. No surprise there. We'll bring in a current Missouri alum, my coworker and brother from another mother, Alex Martin Smith. Alex, good to see you, brother. Alex, you there?
Yeah, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, there we go, Alex. What's going on, buddy?
Nothing much. Hope you and yours had a happy holiday, and happy to be back on the SEC Country Predictions show here.
That makes two of us. You know, my daughter got more toys on Christmas Day than I got in my entire life. I don't know where this came from, where children all of a sudden, the grandparents, everybody's got to get them 35 gifts. But anyway, my wife and I have nowhere to move around in the house. We had a great Christmas. I hope you and your family did the same. I know you're still up in Minnesota, and you'll be heading to New Orleans for a little football game they play down there every year called the Sugar Bowl. This year, about as good a matchup as you can expect with the defending champion Clemson Tigers in a rematch against, of course, Alabama and Nick Saban. You got to be pumped for that trip.
Oh, absolutely. Get down there Friday night. There's a big media day, a big scrum on Saturday morning. Get to ring in the new year in New Orleans. Hopefully both teams stay out of trouble there. And it's going to be what I think is really a classic matchup with two teams that have played for the national title the past two seasons, and now the winner gets to advance to the third straight national title game. So this one's going to be huge. It's really a heavyweight thing here.
We talked a little bit right there coming into the show about the Texas Bowl, and some folks surprised by Texas handling their business last night, but Missouri, a little inconsistency at the quarterback position from Drew Lock, but obviously not having Josh Heupel there, it affected their game plan, it affected their execution on offense, and one of their lowest point totals of the season against a pretty good Texas defense in spite of all the pieces they were missing.
Yeah, I can't say I'm shocked because you tend to see this lag, 3 or 4 weeks off after your final game. It's hard to know what product you'll get exactly from your favorite team. But I was definitely surprised Missouri wasn't able to move the ball. Part of that was due to the fact that, Texas apparently has the best punter to ever play the game of football. Michael Dixon racked up 452 punt yards. I think he had 8 punts inside the 10-yard line. So that really stymied Missouri's offense, and they just were not able to get it going against their old rival, Texas Longhorns. Definitely a big win there.
Yeah, Drew Lock last night, your thoughts? I mean, to me, I walk away. There was some talk about him possibly declaring for the NFL draft after the game. He put that decision on hold a little bit. But to me, I think a true test of the defense he went up against, a little inconsistent to put yourself in the same class with Mason Rudolph, some of these other quarterbacks that are going to go in the first round. I think he'd be best suited to come back another year at Missouri.
Perhaps, and I think there's strong arguments both ways. He really showed the best of what he can do this year, breaking that SEC single-season touchdowns record. A lot for teams to come away impressed by. I remember speaking to an NFL scout back in October, I believe it was, about his play against Georgia. And it's clear he has the arm. He's got a huge arm. But this Missouri offense doesn't require a boatload of decision-making after the snap. I mean, you're usually locked into your side of the field and finding that target quickly, a lot of routes near the line of scrimmage. But when he lets it go deep, there really aren't a lot of other players in college football that can huck it as far as he can. And I think that's his strongest asset. And the mental side is, I think, to be determined in terms of reading the field, reading the defense, and deciding the best move to make, or looking to option 3 or 4 on long developing pass plays. That's the stuff where you just don't know what he's going to be able to do there, and I don't know if another year at Missouri is really going to answer that question. So you could make a strong argument that his stock right now is about as high as it can get, given the production that he was able to come up with at Missouri.
I enjoyed the game. I thought both teams' coaching staffs did a great job of getting them ready. They came out, they competed. Coach Odom said before the game it was their national championship, and they certainly played with it. A couple turnovers early in the game, but I thought the overall effort from all the players on the field was there. It was a nice crowd. It was a good bowl game. I don't know if I'd call it the best bowl game so far. We've definitely had some not-so-good bowl games. What's been the one that you've enjoyed the most?
I think you look back to this past Saturday. You had Army against San Diego State in the Armed Forces Bowl, and Army came up with, I think, 21 points in the final quarter to pull out that win. So I was pretty impressed by that. There was a couple other strong games Friday, Saturday, and I think really that Army game, because they're so run heavy, and for them to be able to conjure up 3 touchdowns in the final frame and win that game, I thought that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, for myself, it was the Birmingham Bowl. They kind of kept it low scoring early on, 10-10 at halftime, and then USF does what it does, and led by Flowers, that guy's going to be something to watch next year. Up and down the field offensively, of course, they're one of the worst tackling teams I've ever seen, but it turns out into a shootout with Texas Tech, and of course the game ends on the final play. I really enjoyed the Birmingham Bowl. As far as the least compelling bowl, I mean, we got a few of them to choose from, but I think, what we saw today in the Military Bowl, I'm going to throw that in there with Navy just absolutely steamrolling Virginia. 49-7, this game has just gone final. We've had it on the background here in the studio. I mean, there's really not much to look into this one. Is there anyone that sticks out to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think that same day when, we mentioned those great bowl games that went down, you also had 34-0 win for, I think it was App State over Toledo. Toledo's an 11-win team. That was the Dollar General Bowl, and I think you can say you got what you paid for there, because it was so boring. You had App State won by 34, and quarterback only had 8 completions and 131 passing yards. So it wasn't even like it was a blowout where you got to see people get really embarrassed. It was just one that I really had no interest in finishing off. So that's my choice.
A few of them, but I think for the most part, you've had some great storylines. And of course, the games continue to get better, a little bit more compelling. We'll break down a few of them coming up here in a second. Guy Aaron Dalton says Missouri looked like the 1-5 start team, not the team at the end of the regular season. He's disappointed in their performance. I think that had a lot to do with who they played at the end of the season. You talk about the Vanderbilts, the Floridas, the Tennessees, the Arkansas of the world, and credit Coach Herman for getting his guys ready to play shorthandedly. I thought Texas really stepped up, so we'll continue to take your comments here on Facebook Live. Now, typically, Alex and I will break down some SEC games, but we don't have any. We have a show Saturday where we'll break down some games with SEC teams involved in bowl games, but right now we'll just take a look at some of the bigger games that are going on the rest of today, and we'll start now with our breakdown of the Camping World Bowl. You bet. This is an interesting game here, Alex, where you got Oklahoma State, a team that's number 3 in all college football in point scoring, going up against a Virginia Tech team who we know Bud Foster's been the defensive coordinator there for 400 years. They really haven't changed their identity much on that side of the ball, but Justin Fuentes, he brought over a spread kind of offense, so I expect a shootout in this game.
Yeah, I think there will be a lot of points scored, and if that's the case, I definitely side with Oklahoma State, because while VT has a decent offense, Josh Jackson's been okay for parts of the year. Oklahoma State is just so consistent on the offensive side of the ball, and Mason Rudolph is clearly one of the best quarterbacks in the country. So I think they are going to get back into that Big 12 territory, 30, 40 points, and I don't think Virginia Tech is going to be able to put up those kind of numbers.
At 7-1, they were somewhat contenders for college football semifinals, but as November came into picture, a couple of costly losses by both of them, it proved that they were pretenders. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't turn winner this game's a 10-win, has a 10-win season. I think that's a pretty good mark for both of these schools and something to grow on moving forward. But I think with Oklahoma State, I think it's kind of a reset, because you had the whole temptation with Coach Gundy possibly leaving for Tennessee. Now it looks like he's going to be there for a while. And I think this is kind of the reset for them. I think they get started tonight with a big win over Virginia Tech in this bowl game. You and I are on the same side with this. Give me Oklahoma State. I'll throw a score out there. They averaged 43. I say a little bit less tonight. 35-21. Final score in this one. Are you as bold to throw out a score, Alex? Or are you just going to...
Heck, why not? You guys put me on camera, I might as well do it. I think I'm going to go 41-17, Oklahoma State.
All right, moving along. Next one we're going to break down today is between the Stanford Cardinal and I got my sheet messed up here. We got Stanford and TCU tonight. And, Coach Patterson's defense, That's where they make their name known. And in the Big 12, that's not easy to do. Stanford, I thought, down the stretch, they had some injuries, especially, with Bryce Love and whatnot. But they've had some time to get healthy. But I just think TCU's defense in this game is going to be enough to get the win.
Yeah, and TCU's defense is certainly underrated, at least in my opinion. I think a lot of people looked at Oklahoma's great success this year and are quick to discount the 2 wins over TCU as just another Big 12 defense. I think part of what made Oklahoma so great is that TCU does have a really strong defense. I think they have one of the strongest defenses in the country, looking at top 10, 15, 25, somewhere in there. And I do think they're able to apply that strength against any opponent that is not Oklahoma, any opponent that is not one of the greatest offensive units of all time. So I do count on TCU to put forth a strong defensive performance.
We're in agreement, TCU in the Alamo Bowl. Moving along, a couple of interesting games later on in the week. We'll break those down on Saturday when we do our show. But you want to talk about a contrast to styles, Big Ten, Pac-12, Wazoo, Washington State taking on Coach D'Antonio with Michigan State, a team that's known for its defense, kind of grinds out some victories. And when I watch Washington State, we know about Luke Falk, the all-time Pac-12 leading passer, but I see explosive playmakers. I don't know, maybe Ohio State in the Big Ten is probably the closest thing I can compare them to, but I don't know that they're ready for the speed of Washington State in this game or Michigan State.
Yeah, and it's not just the speed, but also just, you get into the third and fourth quarter of a game like this where the team is throwing the ball all over the field. They probably found some success to that point. And you get into the end of that game, is your pass defense, are they still even healthy enough to run after these receivers or make these tackles? Washington State, they come after you and they're relentless. And when Luke Falk is on, because he's had some awful games, but when he's on and he's playing at a high level, it is really, really tough to stop that Wazoo offense. So I think I see them having an edge here. Strong quarterback play is usually a decent indicator of success in the postseason, and I think they're going to carry that into this game, and Washington State's going to put up a lot of passing yards.
Is this, which is we've been on the same side of all these games. It's a little interesting to me that Sparty's favored in this game, 2-point favorites later on tonight. That's a 9 o'clock kick on FS1 in the Holiday Bowl. But give me Washington State as well as you. Last but not least, we'll take a look into tomorrow. Just because it's one of the more, right when the bowl matchups came out, this was one that you circled, you looked at, you said, I want to watch this game when it goes down, not only because of the history and the venue, but because of the story programs that are involved in it. And I'm talking about the Cotton Bowl, and you have Ohio State versus USC. Ohio State, of course, being, I don't want to say snubbed because they weren't snubbed, but just that last team on the outside looking in. And I think the question is, how did they respond as far as not playing for what was their goal, a national championship, against this USC team who had the same goal?
Yeah, I know Urban Meyer is, keeping his team extremely focused. There's still a lot of pride to be had here. I don't know if you remember I believe it was the Orange Bowl a few years back when they played Clemson and lost a close one, and he snapped his whiteboard in half, during the game or after the game, and he brings that intensity, and his team brings that intensity, even outside of this playoff structure. So I do like Ohio State. I think they're an excellent football team this year. I agree that they're probably number 5. It's okay for them to get left out of the playoff field, but I would not want to run into them at this juncture of the season. I think they're going to be ready to go, and they're going to play a really solid football game.
Real quick, you mentioned number 5 on the outside looking in. I was having this discussion with a friend of mine yesterday. For argument's sake, if Central Florida beats Auburn, right, where do you put them at the end of the season as far as standings goes? Do you put them at 5? How high can they go if they're the only undefeated team in college football?
I think you would look for them to be, more highly ranked in the AP or coaches poll than they would be in, I guess the CFP they're not even going to put out another poll, So I think they do have a chance to climb because it's not so much about eating crow for the AP and the coaches. If it was dictated by the CFP committee, who consistently kept them pretty low on their list, they might be a little hurt pride there and might keep UCF down a few spots. So I think, yes, if they can put forth a great performance, if they can knock off Auburn, which I would be surprised, but if they're able to do that, I don't think it's out of the question to throw them up there in that top 5 territory, and it's going to depend a little bit on how some of these other teams perform. But certainly they can get that leap that they weren't able to get during the regular season. It might come at the end here.
Well, with all that being said, look, Kerryon Johnson's going to be healthy. I don't see a snowball's chance, and you know what, that happens. I just thought it was for interesting debate. So there you go. We're all on the same side. We got Ohio State, Oklahoma State, TCU, and Washington State. They're all 4 of us, or all 4 games. We're in agreement there. This is Bud Light's prediction amongst friends. Do want to remind you to huddle up with your friends and some ice cold Bud Light, the beer that's famous amongst friends on game day and all season long. Alex, we're going to take a look at SEC bowl game performances and speculate moving forward. And I think this is some interesting fodder for SEC fans as far as what quarterback do you think in the SEC bowl games coming up is going to have the biggest performance and why? And I'll let you go first on this one.
Sure. I would have gone with Drew Lock had the game been a day later, and I would have been wrong, apparently. So I'm glad for that cushion there, and I'm glad for the opportunity to change my choice, and I think really I would go with Jake Fromm at Georgia. I think a lot of the attention is, and rightfully so, is going to be on Baker Mayfield and the Oklahoma offense. I don't think SEC fans realize that outside of the SEC, people don't know a lot about Georgia. They're not, so in awe of what Georgia's been able to accomplish this year. And a lot of people just see a true freshman quarterback. Can he actually make the plays at the right time? And I think he can. I think, watching him live at the SEC championship game, he hit a lot of throws that required, pretty pinpoint accuracy against one of the best defenses in the country. He's able to throw the ball to the sideline in a way that a lot of senior quarterbacks around the country have a hard time with. So I think he really is the real deal. He's not going to reach his full potential, this year or next year probably, but he certainly has enough talent to keep Georgia in the game if they need some big passing plays. And I think he is going to surprise a lot of people outside of the Southeastern Conference, show some people what he can really do.
I think that's a great call, Alex. And there's a couple reasons for that. Obviously, Oklahoma's defense, they're going to give him every chance in the world to succeed. Another thing, I don't think he's a true freshman at this point. You're talking about a 12-game season, SEC championship, a road game at Auburn. Now he's had another 25 practices to get ready for this Rose Bowl. I think the experience that he's got under his belt is worth $1 million. I don't know that he's a freshman anymore, not to mention he's got a nice running game to lean on. But I think that's a great call with Jake Fromm. As far as I go, I'm going to go with Jarrett Stidham here in Atlanta. I just feel like that Central Florida defense, watching them in a few games this year, I mean, they ain't ready, as they say. They ain't ready for an Auburn offense that's going to be angry after the way the season played out. They're going to have a healthy back, and I think Jarrett Stidham showed improvement throughout the season that there's no reason to expect anything less than a 300-yard performance from him in this game. I like Jarrett Stidham. I like Jake Fromm, both of them to have big games. Now, as far as breakout performances for running backs go in this game, I think we're going to stay a little bit close to home, maybe talk about the same game we just did. Who do you like for running back?
It's a little bit of an obvious answer, but I think Kerryon Johnson, the SEC's Offensive Player of the Year, is going to have a great opportunity against UCF to run the football. The Golden Knights I think they're ranked somewhere around that 67th spot in the country in rushing defense. So they've allowed those players to make those plays on the ground this season, and Kerryon is potentially the greatest offensive player they come up against this year. So I really like what he's going to be able to do against that defense, so long as the Auburn defense is able to keep UCF from piling up points and yards. As long as the Auburn defense can keep this game from being a shootout type of thing, Kerryon is going to be able to dictate the pace of the game. He's able to catch passes out the backfield. He's really a workhorse at running back, and he's an excellent pass blocker as well. So he's key to Auburn's success, and he's going to have a chance against this UCF defense to do things that he was not able to do at Mercedes-Benz Stadium earlier this month.
Yeah, Alex, and kind of throwing something else out there with your prediction. It looks like Cam Petway isn't going to be able to play. There's some stuff out there about him possibly staying at home with his family for the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. So it's going to be Kerryon Johnson getting the ball 20, 25 times a game. And if that's the case against that defense you just mentioned, it should be a huge performance. For me, I like Benny Snell. I go back to that Louisville game. What a tremendous start to his career. He's had 2 years. That Louisville game, over 200 yards. This kid's really good. It's not just like, well, Kentucky, we don't have a quarterback, really don't have many playmakers, so we have to run the ball. That's not the way it is. This kid's good. And I know Northwestern's got one of the best defenses, if not the best, in the Big Ten, but I expect them to lean on him and lean on him heavy. I'm talking 25, 30 carries, and you give a guy, somebody that's got that kind of athleticism and special ability, that many opportunities, he's going to break one or two. Now, I'm not saying they win the game, but I expect him to go north of 150 on the bowl day game if they have any chance whatsoever. So give me Benny Snell. As far as a team defense from the SEC that's going to have a dominant performance in the bowl game, who do you like and why?
I look at that Alabama defense, an opportunity against Clemson for a third straight season. They were, not embarrassed. To them, it was an embarrassment. You look back at the Iron Bowl, 26-13 final, and the offense really didn't help them out. But I think the Tide have had a chance to, recuperate a little bit, bring some of these guys back into the fold that were banged up in the Iron Bowl. They're still not at 100%, but they are definitely in a better place than they were in late November. You have the whole added month of game planning, film watching, etc. And you also have Nick Saban as your head coach. And I just think, number one, it's really hard to beat Alabama after they suffer what they would call an embarrassing loss. And it's also really hard to beat Alabama 2 years in a row, which Clemson is going to be trying to do. And I do think the absence of Deshaun Watson in this game in particular is going to be big. I know Clemson is all around. They're probably a better team than they've had the last couple of years. But they don't have that superstar at quarterback to sort of come up with something out of thin air, which Deshaun did so many times in those games, and especially maybe in the first matchup. Kelly Bryant is not that kind of player yet. And while he's efficient, and it's a very efficient team that's going to be consistent on both sides of the ball, I think you need those kind of magic moments at the quarterback position. And I don't think Clemson is going to be able to come up with them. So I do like Alabama's defense in this game, and I think they're going to sort of reassert that reputation as one of the country's most dominant.
It's a great call, and don't forget, the linebacking core at Alabama's been hurt all year. They're going to be close to 100%. They're going to be down a guy, but close to 100% for the first time since early on in the season, as close to healthy as they've ever been. And that's going to play a huge role in this as well. Real quick before I give you mine, if Clemson wins this football game and they go on to win the national championship, are we talking about maybe Dabo Swinney and Clemson jumping over equal to Alabama football?
I think in the short term, yeah, it's a pretty easy yes for 2 out of the 3 years to win that title, especially 2 years in a row, and to have conquered Alabama twice. I think going into 2018, you would say, yes, this Clemson program is in a better place than Alabama. But if we're going to look at it, in hindsight, 20, 30 years from now, I think there will need to be more titles won by Clemson. There will need to be more great seasons at Clemson for them to be truly considered a dynasty.
I'm going Georgia in this one. I think Oklahoma. Let me get back real quick. Kirby Smart, you mentioned Nick Saban as being a main reason for your pick. It's defense. I think Kirby Smart, when you're talking about defense, yeah, he's younger. He's not as accomplished as a head coach as Nick Saban. I'm not even trying to put him in the same conversation, but I do think at the end of the day, he's a very underrated defensive mind for whatever reason. And I think, giving him time to prepare for this big game, an unorthodox preparation, if you will, because the dynamics of Oklahoma's offense and the playmakers they have all over the field, I think he's been in this before. He's been in this situation. He's had the downtime. And I just think this Georgia defense that's laden with upperclassmen and playmakers in the secondary, the linebackers, pass rush, you name it, I think they're going to be ready. And I don't think Oklahoma's seen anything like it before. I really expect a big performance from Georgia's defense, and I think the game plan, Alex, is going to be to take away the run. You watch Oklahoma play and you think it's all Baker Mayfield. They run for over 200 yards a game, and I think you take that away from them, you make them one-dimensional. And I know that's crazy talk when you talk about the Heisman Trophy and the level of player that that Mayfield is, but I think that might be the game plan, and they got the players to do it. I like Georgia's defense to show up big for the SEC out there in the Rose Bowl, and if what we just talked about, if both of them come true, you're talking about an Alabama-Georgia national championship here in Atlanta, and this is supposed to be a down year for the SEC. Now, we're jumping ahead of ourselves, but that's a possibility on the table.
Yeah, and not only that, but you're also looking at in 2018, if so long as Auburn can finish off UCF in the Peach Bowl, you're looking at 3 SEC teams probably in the top 5 of the preseason poll next year,
right.
Or at least very, very close to that. So something to keep an eye on as well.
So you're going with Georgia, you're going with Alabama, I'm going with Georgia in that one. What about your upset special, a team that a lot of folks aren't expecting to win that you think might surprise somebody on game day?
Yeah, there's a little bit of slim pickings here in terms of the SEC teams that, can even pull upsets. But I do like South Carolina's chances against Michigan. They're in Tampa for the Outback Bowl. Teams are already getting into altercations. I think the Florida police were called to a bowling alley last night after the teams, started exchanging words. And it's just one of those where clearly there's going to be something on the line for these guys, even if it's just some, personal vendetta or whatever. Last I checked, the Gamecocks are 7.5-point underdogs. And to me, that is just it's quite the gap, given that Michigan's passing offense has been basically non-existent this year, and even their guy who's going to start that game, Brandon Peters, he had maybe one solid game, one good game, and was pretty iffy for the rest of his 4 or 5 games he played. I don't see it from that Michigan offense. And I think for that reason, South Carolina's defense is going to be able to keep them in the game. Then the question is, can they make plays on offense? They just replaced their OC. Kurt Roper's out. McClendon's in. So maybe there's going to be a spark there. Maybe there's going to be a few surprise touchdowns from the Gamecocks, and they can pull this one off.
Hey, crazier things have happened. Tucker Nixon on our Facebook Live profile says UCF is going to shock the world. Yeah, I just looked at the line on that, Alex. I thought it would be a 14-point spread. It's only 9.5. So I guess whatever Vegas sees, they feel like they can keep it offensively, obviously, in what would be a track meet. I don't see UCF shutting down Auburn by any stretch of the imagination, but sets up for an entertaining football game. I'm going to go upset special. I'm really going out on a limb here. I've been going for them all year, and they've let me down continuously. Only this time Kevin Sumlin won't be there to help. Texas A&M over Wake Forest. I know it's not a big – Wake Forest is favored in this game by 3 points. I just think that all hands are going to be on deck in this game because you know Jimbo Fisher's watching. And a lot of these players have ties to the old coaching regime. Look, when Jimbo Fisher walks in that door, you're level 0. You've got to prove yourself all over again, and what opportunities do you have to do that other than a bowl game? So I think it's going to be all hands on deck for A&M, and I look for them to – I don't want to say shock the world. It's a 3-point spread, but I like them in a little bit of an upset over the Demon Deacons from Wake Forest. That's my big upset. That's all I got.
The fans, people tuning into that one. Keep an eye on Wake Forest quarterback John Wolford. I know he's not a name that a lot of people know, but for my money, he was very close to earning that all SEC or all ACC quarterback spot. Over Lamar Jackson. He outplayed Jackson when those teams played, and Wake Forest won. So he will be tough to contain. He's had a couple duds this year, but John Wolford, I think he has a chance to have a really big game for Wake.
The job that they've done at Wake Forest this year is tremendous. Winning football at Wake Forest in itself is one heck of an accomplishment. And Alex, as far as a team after this bowl season is over, win or lose, where we're going to kind of jump on the bandwagon or jump off the bandwagon, being a doomsday scenario moving into next year, what team potentially sets up to have a situation where we're like, woe is me, boy, are they in trouble, i.e. Drew Lock leaving for the NFL? I think that would leave Missouri in a lot of trouble. Or what team puts on a dominant performance where you're saying, wow, this team's legit, they're going to be for real next season? You got a team from the SEC?
I think to answer it in a little bit different way, I jumped the gun a little bit on this earlier, but I think there is a lot at stake for Auburn in this Peach Bowl against UCF, where if they come out and they really just fall flat and they lose by a few touchdowns, I think that is going to affect their preseason ranking next year. And on the flip side of that, it's really about the opportunity cost, because they have an opportunity to beat UCF in this game and sort of solidify themselves as, in that top 5 area of the teams in the postseason here. And I think they have enough coming back next year where if they can put forth a decisive performance in this game and a big win over UCF, I think they will challenge, in that number 1 territory in the preseason poll next year. Whereas they definitely won't if they fall flat against UCF in Atlanta.
I think it's a great call. I'm with you on Auburn. You're talking about, Chip Lindsey's offense. What were they going to be able to do? Were they going to get away from being just primarily a running football team and kind of get more pass dimension in there? They've done that. Jarrett Stidham's done a great job. He's grown. So offensively, you have to think that they're going to continue to grow. Malzahn's got the contract extension, so you can put that behind. You don't have to worry about it. And Kevin Steele's already got commitments from several guys that might have gone to the NFL that are going to come back for next season. So I agree with you. If they win this game against UCF, even if they lose, you can make an argument on paper that Auburn, regardless of that tough schedule, they got to play against the West and their crosstown rival from Georgia, they're going to be in the conversation. I think that's a great call. I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, and I think so too. And the thing is, even if they lose this game close, that's in the bowl season. That's just as good as a victory. But voters just don't want to see you show up and just get laid to waste by the opponent. And I think against UCF, there's a chance that could happen. I think Mackenzie Milton and that offense can roll and go up against anybody and have some success. So they have to be careful. But you just want to avoid the blowout loss. And if you keep it close, or if you win by a lot, I don't think that's going to affect too much. But there does seem to be something to lose here for Auburn. I think they do have to put forth a strong performance.
Alex, I can't help but notice, looking behind you, there appears to be, somebody's making some shadow puppets of what looks to be like an antelope or something on your wall. Am I seeing things?
I can't speak to whether or not there's actually a dead impala on the wall over there. I am at the in-laws up in the Minneapolis area, and
right.
Well,
they're
I think
a dangerous
there's
animal, so I
yeah, exactly. I look at it as more of a service. I did not take the animal down by my own hand, but I guess I can't judge anyone else for doing that, especially when they're related to me. So
no, you can't.
That's where we are.
Hey, Alex, thank you so much, brother. Great to see you. Happy New Year to you. Safe travels to New Orleans, and we'll catch up after you get back.
All right, thanks, Hans. You too.
You got it, man. All right, there he is, Alex Martin Smith via satellite from parts unknown. I can't keep up with that guy. Hey, thanks to everybody for helping put on the show. Thanks to our sponsor, Bud Light. Do want to remind you there's one thing fans can all rally behind. That's tailgating with ice-cold Bud Light. Thanks to everybody behind the glass. And a wonderful day. You guys take care. We'll see you Saturday. Myself and Matt Stewart, 12 o'clock. Bud Light Prediction Amongst Friends will break down all the SEC games, including the big New Year's Day games and the college football semifinals. Again, that's Saturday at noon. We'll talk to you then. Until then, good day.